Welcome to Grappling with a Gray, a forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making to help us more clearly see both sides of complex issues and better navigate the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Yonason Goldson, and today we're going to mix things up just a little bit. With me on this special episode, I'm joined by Tom Gegax, who is a former CEO of Tires Plus, chairman of Gramercy Fund, a socially responsible venture capital fund, and focus of the film Confessions of a CEO Blowing the Whistle on Corporate America, which features Robert Kennedy Jr., Deepak Chopra, and Blue Zone's founder Dan Blutner. Described as a pioneer, a Renaissance man, and a real-life Forrest Gump, Tom narrates his personal transformation from a toxic CEO into a visionary leader advocating for healthier company culture and more responsible leadership in business and in government. His campaign for personal responsibility and corporate accountability made him irresistible to me, and I feel privileged to have him as a guest. As you will hear, Tom has vocal cord damage from radiation treatment for cancer, but his message is too important to let that get in the way. And for this episode, my frequent guest, Kirsten Yurich, is joining me not as a guest, but as co-host. Kirsten is an organizational performance management consultant, peer leaders group chair with Vistage Worldwide Incorporated, and adjunct professor of education at Felician University. Thank you both for being with me today.
You're welcome.
And here is today's ethics challenge. Employee performance, especially in large companies, is likely to follow the bell curve. A few superstars, a lot of solid performers, and a few underperformers. Amazon has developed an innovative way of dealing with the third group. It's called the pivot program. Employees who do not meet management performance expectations are given three options. 1, leave with a severance package. 2, accept entry into the pivot program to help them improve and remain at Amazon. 3, if they fail to convince their manager that they have improved, they can then appeal. At each stage, the worker is offered a progressively lower severance payment in return for a release of claims and a promise not to sue. The consensus on Reddit is that the pivot program is designed to coerce employees to quit while fabricating evidence to defend firing them if they don't. It is described as humiliating for employees who go through it and toxic for employees who fear they might have to. The claim is that employees rarely or never pass the program. Certainly, companies need to have some process for dealing with employees who are not meeting expectations. Is Amazon's model intrinsically flawed, or are underperforming employees merely bitter? In general, how can leaders preserve employee dignity while maintaining performance standards? Tom, what are your initial thoughts?
A few. We need to think about how they approach it. Are they not only the process, but overall, what is their mindset? Is it a caring mindset, or is it a fearful, vindictive mindset? That's a big deal, because you can, my philosophy is being warm-hearted, tough-minded. So underperforming employees need to be addressed, as you alluded to. Yet, is it in a CYA way, a way of tricking them, or do we really care about them? So that overall warm-hearted, really caring about them has to be an umbrella over the whole process, even before we get into the steps.
Mm-hmm.
The second element are the steps. And to me, when you go to severance being the first step, it's kind of not the right order. The severance should be the last step after the other things have been tried. The third thing I'll mention is that a severance package, a severance payment has its downside, and the company is likely well aware of it. A, it can disqualify you from unemployment benefits, because it's then categorized as voluntary. So they lose their ability to get unemployment benefits. Secondly, you can be assured there'll be language that stops the employee from any kind of litigation. So if there was any inappropriate or mistreatment, that's out the window. Those are my first three comments regarding this.
Yeah. I love the first one that you said the most in terms of this is one piece of a big plan that they have in place, right? What is their overall approach to performance management, performance improvement? Yonason, the way you open this up, right? This is how they're dealing with that bottom third or the bottom of the bell curve. But it has to fit into their overall approach, Tom, to what you said, is how are they approaching all employees? Is this an environment that is run through positive reinforcement? This is a positive place, and we want to reward performance. And so, the opportunities to grow and improve are looked upon as opportunities, right? Because I want what other people have, which is more and more and more, because when I do more, I get more? Or is this a place that is run overall by fear and a work to escape, right? I want to be under the radar. I don't want to be noticed by my manager because, any attention is bad attention. So the way, and then to your second point, right, how it is designed makes you think this is probably an organization run by fear and a work to escape.
Right.
Employees usually can tell pretty well what's motivating their employers.
Yeah.
And today's corporate America, fear, unfortunately, even if it's subtle, SUBTLE, it can be very subtle, but they know that they were reading between the lines, that if you don't do this is what's going to happen to you. So it's not good. The other element is corporate America has changed. Employees used to be looked upon very differently. There were pension plans, there were profit sharing quite often. Those are gone.
Yeah.
The CEO used to make, in the 70s, 20 times the average worker in a company. Today, they make 350 times.
Yep.
So the whole aura, vibration, energy of the organization is very different based on things like that.
I would add to that, Tom, that you're seeing more CEOs be expendable now than you did in the past as well. More are either leaving or being asked to leave. And I think that adds pressure to their need to perform, which pushes down that pressure into programs like this.
Yeah.
And they're often leaving with golden parachutes. So there's
Well,
a
I wasn't
certain
going to say.
Right.
Yeah, well, I mean, but there's a certain lack of accountability. So
Yeah.
I might lose my job, I might lose some prestige,
Right.
but I'm not going to take a big financial hit.
Yeah. Yeah. And someone will come knocking. right? You've got
Yeah.
something to give to the next
But,
company.
a great example of the golden parachute, although when they stayed, during the period where there was the crash and the banks had to be bailed out, taxpayers
Hmm.
paying these banks hundreds of billions of dollars. Well, in that era, all of the bank CEOs got giant payments, not even to leave, but giant incentives and payments still leading their company. So, I mean,
So
it makes no
embarrassing.
sense. And we talk about a lot of this in our film.
Yeah.
Corporate misbehavior and overreach and greed is out of control.
Mm.
Well, there was
Oh,
that phrase that I think it became a book or too big to fail.
mm,
Um, and
Yeah.
it's not just in business. I think it's the same principle that underlies a lot of these celebrities that get community service for what
right,
the rest of us would get jail time for.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And when people perceive unfairness, it makes them less ethical.
Yes.
Right.
Why
Yeah.
should I be honest and be upright? Why should I be the chump who's doing the right
Mm,
thing
Right.
when the system is geared against me? And
yeah.
so we create a very destructive cycle, don't we?
Yeah.
And the more transparency there is into all of those instances, the more you get people feeling that way. And I think it's really hard as a mother of four, like it's really hard to parent right now in terms of them, the children seeing all of these types of situations and stories. And you hear exactly what you just said, Yonason, like, well, why would I work that hard? Why would I put in the extra hours? Why would I do X, Y, and Z? No one else is doing that.
Right.
Other people get away with this, that, and the other. It's like, because it's right.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Because I'm your mother. Oh, that doesn't go far.
Yeah.
Although I like to think that it kicks in at some point, that when our kids get older and they can look back.
You still want to be that voice,
Sure.
right, in their head, and we just can't change the narrative.
I
Yeah.
mean, my youngest son, who's working for a large investment bank, was uh, a different bank came after him,
Mm,
and they offered him a very substantial
hmm.
increase in pay,
Hmm.
and he discussed it with us. Because he felt, on the one hand, he felt loyal to his current place. They had
Sure.
treated him well. He was growing. He had a good relationship. He didn't particularly want to leave. But the financial incentive was so significant,
Mm-hmm.
he
Mm,
couldn't really justify turning it down.
Right.
And so we talked it through, and in the end, he went to his boss and
hmm.
said, here's the situation.
Yeah.
I like where I am, but I've got this offer, and they matched it.
Wow.
Right. Perfect way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. On the flip side, I was just speaking with a colleague. She spent 16 years at a lobbying firm without that type of conversation, no value add conversation, no, probably outside of cost of living, no increase in pay for the increase in value she's bringing in clients and things like that. And, she finally left and took all the clients,
I've heard
right?
stories like
And
that.
it's like after 16 years, like, how, how do you not see that you are just, you are banking on somebody um, not valuing themselves. And I think it probably took her 10 years too long to figure that out. But, and I think this next generation values themselves quite a bit, and they're not putting up with that type of treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
where
think,
does that kind of short-sightedness come from? I mean, when I talk to people about ethics, one of the
mm,
responses I often get is, everything you say makes so much sense. Why don't people get this?
mm.
And I don't have a really good answer.
Do you think the bias around, the fundamental, I don't want to be technical, but the fundamental attribution error, right? Like we internalize our own decisions and mistakes and things and justify ourselves from an internal standpoint, and then everyone else from an external standpoint, right? And so we give ourselves more grace, more chances. Well, this is why that worked out for me, or this is why that was the right decision, or why that really wasn't my fault, right? But other people, we don't. And it's just this psychological error that we all fall into. I'm just wondering if that maybe plays into it somewhat.
You know, I can see that would be one potential. The flip side of that, people are pretty hard on themselves.
True.
They feel guilt or shame. So internally, we quite often are putting ourselves down. And now, what happens then? If I don't feel okay, I'm going to make you not okay.
100%.
But if I feel okay, I'll make you okay.
There's room
whether
for you.
you're a coworker or a spouse. So I believe the internal drives the external rather than being different. So I will make everybody else okay if I'm not okay.
Yeah. Well, that really speaks to our leaders, and why I do what I do now is working with leaders one-on-one, and like we need them leading from a place of certainly ethics, but also wellness, from health, from balance, right? Because if not, they're going in and dumping on their next team level.
Right.
That team is dumping on the next team. All of those people are taking it home. And I speak from personal experience, right? I did this. I dumped on my team. I worked from a place of fear and shame and overworking, and also took it home. And none of those things were good for me, my team, or my company.
And you talk about this in your movie, Tom, that
Yeah.
if we're not eating right, if we're not sleeping right, if we're not
Right.
living a healthy, responsible lifestyle, it doesn't
Yeah.
stay in the office.
Yeah.
It doesn't stay at
Doesn't stay
work.
at home. Yeah. No. There's no line.
I think
What
maybe
happens if there's no
There you go.
Yeah.
You froze for about 15 seconds.
Okay.
I heard you say, you're right. In our movie, I didn't have the emotional health, the spiritual health, or the body work. I was armored up. I was thinking only of myself, and everybody else was wrong or right. They were wrong, and I was right.
Yeah.
I had no spiritual mooring. So all of that led to the crash. But after I got emotional wellness training, education, spiritual body work, then I brought that in the organization, and everyone was healthier. But before that, I put everybody down. My affairs, I was living in a totally wrong way. And that happens too often with our leaders who feel like they're entitled to excess.
Tom, what was the catalyst for you for the shift?
Divorce, cancer, and company ready to go under. So those three, it took this male CEO first child controlling. It took that kind of serious fall.
Yeah.
Had me limp into therapy to, rather than just go to church on Sunday to ask forgiveness for what I did last week, and I'm about to do the coming week. It was
Mm.
a much deeper spirituality and body work that uh, got through the armor, the concrete neck and body that armored up.
Yeah.
But it's all in the film. If you haven't seen it, Kirsten, I highly recommend it.
Yeah. I'm curious. I mean, those are such tragic things to go through, right? But they turned your life around in terms of what you could do for yourself, your company, and certainly the message for other CEOs. What's a strong enough catalyst if somebody doesn't go through something like that? How do we get to leaders that don't crash, but yet are still leading in these
Yeah.
unhealthy ways?
Well, they need to be aware of their instrument panel or dashboard.
Mm,
There are typically warning signs.
mm,
And if they think about that, and most leaders, if they're good ones, they're proactive,
yeah,
not reactive.
right.
Proactive, if you see these warning signs, do something beforehand. Read uh, spiritual books, read emotional books, seek therapy. I mean, if it's okay to have a tennis coach, why isn't it okay to have a psychological coach
Sure.
or a spiritual coach? So all of this I talk about in our film is
Yeah.
designed to wake up CEOs and leaders and to teach employees how to manage up
Mm,
or find more healthy companies or start their own.
yeah. I was just on a call with somebody today and her leadership changed and they're disconnected. They're not walking the floor. They're not listening to requests for more employees. They're saying only hire temps, even though their workload and their pipeline is 100% more than it was expected to be. And I was like, what is one thing I can do for you today? And she's like, help me find another place to work.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it's just, and I think that's a wake up call is like when you run out of employees because of the way you're leading.
right.
Yeah, I have a friend. He and his wife are both in education, and she had a senior position, not just teaching but administration in a private school. And she got called in one day. A new board had joined, had
Mhm.
taken over, and they said, "We'd like you to go from, um, I think it was 2/3 time to full time and take a 50% cut in pay."
Yeah,
And she said, "Why would I do that?"
right.
Yeah,
And they said, "Well, we don't really care because we can find a young woman who's just out of school that we
Wow.
can hire for a fraction of what you're costing us."
hmm
And so she left and she became a secretary. Um, the happy ending is that 2 years later, she was called back. "We need you back."
I bet you do
Schools in chaos.
because those people don't know what they're doing.
Right? The
right,
inmates are running the asylum.
Yeah,
And
right,
shocking.
fortunately the school recovered.
Yeah,
Because at least they were, but your question, Kirsten, I think is so on the mark. And it fits with your whole narrative, Tom, that if we don't get dragged to the edge
yeah.
and look into the abyss, it's very hard for us to motivate ourselves
right,
Mm,
to look vulnerable, to admit we've been wrong, to buck the system, because this was all my other CEO
right,
colleagues are doing in
hmm.
their
yeah,
businesses. And why should I be the odd man out?
right,
I say get a different group, get a different peer group, right? Sit around with people who are trying to do it in a healthy,
Mm-hmm.
in a balanced way, who will help call out those blind spots for you and say, your dashboard's blinking red over here and you haven't brought that up today,
Yeah,
right?
that's a great tip.
Yeah,
Kirsten.
we have a comment from Mark. The armor Tom cited that we wear to protect ourselves is the same armor that prevents us from seeing the signs Tom also cited.
Yes,
So we're so
beautiful.
worried about protecting ourselves that we isolate ourselves,
Yes,
Right.
and we're insulated from our environment, but that goes in both directions.
that means we
Yeah.
can't read our environment.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's an excellent insight from him.
yeah, beautiful comment.
Yeah. Well, Mark is also one of my regular guests, so he's sneaking in.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Good for him. Good for him. Good for him.
You know,
That Mark.
one of the points that comes up recurrently for me is that in there's a biblical commandment to give rebuke, to
Mhm.
rebuke your fellow. But the Hebrew word for rebuke comes from the same root as the word for validate.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
when I rebuke you, what I should be saying is, I believe you can do better.
Yeah.
And I have confidence that you can improve. And if we can make that our tone, and I think it goes back to your very first comment, Tom. What is the mindset
Hmm.
of leadership?
Mm-hmm.
Do they want to empower and enable their people to develop their potential, to make the best possible contribution, to feel fulfilled while they are contributing in the best possible way? Um, and if not, what are they thinking?
Mm-hmm.
But when rebuke is given in that way, then it's received so much differently.
Hmm.
Right.
That's a
Yep.
beautiful, beautiful way to look at it. Hmm.
You know, people don't realize that the percentage of what the message that gets to people between your words, your body language, and
Hmm.
your tone, only 7%
Yep.
is your word.
Yep.
Your body language and tone are 93% in
Hmm.
interhuman relations, not the temperature is 72 outside, but in human interaction,
Yeah.
93.7.
Yeah. And
That's
we
one of
worry
the
so much. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, it's one of the things that um, I've been really since I was in college. I have been working on being less sarcastic.
Hmm.
Um, so this has been a
Why?
work in progress for over 40 years.
Why would you do that?
Getting closer to 50 years. And um, well, what happened was I was I can still visualize this. I was in my college apartment, and my roommate was washing dishes, and I was waiting for him to get done because I wanted to make myself something to eat. So he finished washing the dishes, and he was standing there, and it wasn't clear to me whether he was done or not. So I said, "Are you through here?" And he turned around and he snapped at me. He said, "What do you mean am I through here? What's that supposed to mean?" I said, "What's the problem? I just asked if you were done." He said, "Well, maybe if everything out of your mouth wasn't a sarcastic remark, I wouldn't have reacted that way."
Mm.
Well, that's probably not the best way to rebuke people, but for whatever reason, I recognize, he's right.
Mm.
And and it's interesting because Jews are notoriously sarcastic, and yet we see it as a very negative trait.
Interesting.
But what I found is that in social media, or really in anything that's written in the written word, sarcasm does not always come across as sarcasm and can often be taken seriously.
Yes.
And that then you're really in trouble.
Yeah,
You've
right.
really
Yeah.
communicated the wrong message.
Good
Hmm.
advice I got from a mentor was there is no font for tone.
Very good.
There is
I didn't hear that.
there is no font for tone. And so that 7% in the written form, we really have to be careful what that looks like.
And all those emojis, they only go so
Oh,
far.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I got in so much trouble with my written word. And we're so brave behind the keyboard,
Right.
right? These memos and these, emails and reply alls. It's like just pick up the phone and
yeah,
call. Relationships and teams would do so much better to have more in person or, teams, whatever, conversations and
right.
get off the written word because we read it through our lens as we are, not as the person sent it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just such a biased
Right.
way to communicate. Ugh,
Very well said.
yeah.
Yeah, I had phone phobia most of my life, and it
Not
was
easy.
so I had a speaking job, it was one of my early jobs, and I sent an email, and from the response, it was clear that the executive director I was dealing with found this offensive, what I had said, and I
Mm,
really couldn't understand why. So I tried to fix it, and that made it worse.
Hmm.
So I said, "Okay, got to pick up the phone,"
yes.
and I said, Bob, I really don't want to get off on the wrong foot. And he broke into laughter and it cleared the air and it was done. But if I
Right.
insisted on trying to keep making my point
Yeah.
by email, who
Mm-hmm.
knows what would have happened.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like exercise. We never want to start, but once we're done, we feel really good. We
Yes.
never want to pick up the phone, but once we're done with the call, it's like, oh, I should have done that sooner.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same. It's the same. Yeah. So
So yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just
Oh,
going back to the story and the scenario. One of the other thoughts I was having is, Tom, the second point you made around, or I think the third point you made around the order in which they have the steps for that group, right? First, it's the severance, then it's the pivot program, then it's the appeal, right? To me, that really shows that their intent is about people leaving, not about
Right.
people getting better,
Right.
right? And it also, as a behavior analyst by trade and by license, I'm about setting the conditions for success for people, right? And there's an organizational responsibility and a leadership responsibility for doing that. And when all we do is push that on the performer, we're abdicating as the organization and as the leader. And that's always a recipe for disaster because, as we know, uh, who's our favorite uh, who's our favorite quoting person I love to quote, and I can't think of his name while I'm live, of course. Peter Drucker, if you pit a good employee against a bad system, the system is always going to win.
I
So
haven't heard that. I like that.
I think that's him anyway. But that's what's happening here is they've set up a bad system, and whether it was a good employee or not, in that system of fear and work to escape, and I don't want to be seen by my manager, so it doesn't matter what my work looks like. No one's gonna succeed, or succeeding is probably just going to be skirting under the radar.
and you find that in politics too. You can have young, idealistic people
Oh,
wanting to make the world better,
make a
and by
difference.
and by the time they've gone through the system, they're just
Hmm.
part of the problem.
Yes, I
But
just did. Yeah.
your point, Kirsten, on you have to look at the manager first. Have they done their job? Every time uh, someone would come to me and say,
Yeah.
hey, one of my teammates or employees that work for me, they're not getting the job done.
Mm,
I asked a series of questions.
yep.
I said, every time you're pointing the finger, there are three or four
Mm,
coming back at you. So have you told them, watch them, give them feedback,
yeah.
watch them again, ask them how you're able to help,
Yep.
how can the organization support you in a different way.
Yep.
There are various things you need uh, some kind of additional education
Hmm.
or support. All of that has to be done first before you ever move in to a pivot. Here's your here's your severance.
Right. Right. I love that. And it- we so often jump to training and they don't know how. And one of my questions is, well, did they ever know how? Did they ever do it for you at an acceptable level? Well, yeah. I'm like, well, then they actually probably still know how. So why do you think they're not motivated to do it
Mm-hmm.
anymore? Right. This is
Right.
probably, a motivation, an incentive, a consequence issue, not a skill issue. But we always
Right.
throw this very expensive training and coaching on top of something when we really haven't analyzed what the problem is. Not
Yeah. The other thing I didn't see in the pivot program of Amazon,
Hmm.
uh, anytime we went through the step and it was determined that the teammate we didn't have employed
Yeah,
uh, wasn't going to fit in that job, we were very caring and looked at
yeah,
outplacement.
yeah.
Uh, I didn't hear outplacement
Hmm.
mentioned anywhere in that program. Or is there anywhere else in the organization that their skill set and personality might work?
Right.
So there are many things. Their program seemed simplistic, rigid, and out of order.
Yeah. I think it may go back to it's a disadvantage of one of their strategic advantages, right? So Amazon is diverse and it's wide, and we know their footprint is huge, right? And so they've got their HR department is as bigger than most companies in America, right? So their advantage is how big and diverse they are. So that's an advantage. Well, what's a disadvantage of that advantage? We can't be flexible, we can't be personal, and people are probably a commodity. And
Mm-hmm.
so this to me is, it's unfortunately a direct result of treating people like a commodity because we have such a diverse footprint. That's how we have to
Yeah, very
operate.
well said.
Well, let me really play devil's advocate here, and maybe this will be the last part of our conversation. That um, why should they care? I mean, apparently, from
Mm,
what I've heard and read, they have a terrible reputation among their employees, among their vendors, and yet we all use them.
yeah.
We all depend upon them, and they're making a fortune. And I think Jeff Bezos has the biggest private yacht in the world. Um,
Why should they care?
is there any motivation for them? I mean, I try. I when it's reasonable, or let's probably when it's easy as opposed to reasonable, I will look for other options. Right? I wanted to buy folding chairs. I went to Costco instead of Amazon because I like Costco.
Yeah.
But if I need something and I can't find it easily somewhere else, I will use Amazon. Does that make
Mm,
me part of the problem? Um,
interesting.
where, how do we address a problem like this other than just trying to take the lessons for ourselves? And I suppose that's always
Hmm.
the first step. But are they, and we talked about too big to fail, are they just too big to change?
Well, is it a problem for them? So we see it as a problem because it's against our leadership nature and our values and those kinds of things. And so we can stand here in judgment, right, of how they're doing it. But from their standpoint, to your point, Yonason, why should they care? Is it a problem for them that they have this negative press, that they have a cycle of people going through? We only do things that work, right?
Yeah.
We don't keep banging our head on the wall if it's not doing something for us. So they're only going to keep the program around if it's working for them. So there's the argument that it's working for them.
Uh, this is if you don't have EQ, as you talked about
Right.
earlier, Kirsten, or you don't have a true spiritual base,
Mm-hmm.
then you won't care.
Right.
And if you don't really care about them, and they are, as you said, Kirsten, a commodity,
Mm-hmm.
then it won't change. But I believe that no matter how big you get, if the org chart and philosophy, uh, healthy philosophy comes forward, and you put the customer at the top and the CEO at the bottom,
Right.
and it's a pyramid going that way, then you will care. But if you don't have the emotional and spiritual health, you won't.
Yeah.
And we try to cover that in Confession of a CEO and hope that they seek help and improve themselves as human beings and bring that into their company. And if they don't, then it will never get into their company.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. So if it doesn't start from the CEO, yes, and I think your question is, how else can we influence a system that big if it doesn't come from the top?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard the data point that a system requires 7% to change, right? So that's how much of a caterpillar is inside of the chrysalis before it becomes a butterfly. There's only 7% left. It's true, I believe, in chemistry. So that's biology, human systems. We need 7% of a system to change to reach the tipping point, right? That's what that book was about. And so could we reach 7% of people doing what you're doing, Yonason? Like, if I can go somewhere else, I will, because of issues like this, until something like that changes. Would that get noticed? I don't know. I could hope.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's there's a, and again, this is getting into theology, but I think it really is practical in our
Yeah.
lives that the only thing I really have control over is myself.
Right. What I do.
And if I take responsibility for myself, if I see myself as accountable for my behavior, for my actions, then I'm doing what I can do.
Yeah.
And the outcome after that is not in my hands. So some people will see me. Simon Sinek tells this story that I've told over many times because I think it just illustrates this point that he and a friend were walking down the sidewalk talking, and they saw that up ahead of them, a fellow was wearing a backpack. His backpack had split open and things were falling out. And so as they walked along, they started picking stuff up as they came to it. They caught up with him at a signal, and they said, "Hey, buddy, this stuff fell out of your backpack, and be careful because you got a split in the seam there, and you don't want to lose any more." I said, "Oh, thanks very much." And they went on their way. At the next signal, another fellow came up to them and said, "Hey, I saw what you did for that guy. That was cool." And first of all, why should this be so unusual
Right.
that that's cool? But on the other hand, it is cool because that's
Yeah.
what we should be doing.
Right.
And you never know who's watching, and you
Well,
never know who you're going to change.
yeah.
And we send out the ripples, and
Yeah.
and when we pray that we
Mm.
will contribute to
Right.
society getting better.
Yeah.
So we do what we can.
Yeah. Well, I think about that when you hand off, whether it's an item or it's money or something like that to a person that you walk by or drive by that clearly needs something, right? And I've been commented to or judged or like, well, what if they're just buying something that's, nefarious or this or that? And I'm like, well, I'm only responsible for my action and the intent behind my action. After that, it's out of my hands,
Right.
and that's what I want to teach my kids.
Right.
You've really given me, Johnson, something to think about in terms of the buying, because I, know by first name my Amazon driver, and maybe I shouldn't after this conversation. And there's maybe some more patience I can teach my kids, and we can, list up the things that we need, and we can group our trips and we can look for other avenue. I think you've really given me something to think about.
My mother, who passed away early this year, she had owned Amazon stock, and she decided she didn't like Amazon, and she told her broker to sell her stock. And he pleaded with her, Barbara, don't sell. And she did. And we still talk about this because
Yes.
our financial situation would be a whole lot different if she hung on to it. But, now in this conversation, it's really the first time I thought about, I can really admire that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
right,
don't like the company. I don't want to be part of it.
Right.
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 I don't want
It,
to invest in it. I mean,
yeah.
literally and figuratively.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Tom, you have a final thought you'd like to share with us?
Right.
Only a thank you for having uh, me on, given my voice, and fortunately, I have my mind. So you got content, hopefully good content, but delivery maybe wasn't that good. But I wish your viewers every good health, wellness, and a meaningful life.
Hmm. Wonderful.
Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for everything that you have done in your own personal transformation and in trying to spread that inspiration to others. Um, I think you're sending out a lot of ripples.
Yeah.
And
I'm doing my best to do that with Confessions of a CEO, which had 100% Rotten Tomatoes rating and a 5-star on Amazon. So it tells me that people are hungry for this kind of message.
Yeah.
I think
Wonderful.
I think we'd all want to be inspired if we just
Mm-hmm.
get out of our own way and cancel
Make the
some of the
armor off.
noise. But yeah, I do recommend the movie. It's available on Amazon, and it's definitely worth watching because it's not just a feel-good story. It
Yeah.
is really a story of taking stock, of commitment to change, of personal redemption, and of how one person can transform the culture around him or her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's really what we're here for.
It's great.
So it's been our pleasure and privilege to have you part of this conversation. Kirsten, thank you again.
Of course.
Yeah,
Always delighted to have you part of the program. For those of you who are watching and listening, if you have a topic you'd like us to take up, please go to my website, ethicsninja.com. Use the contact information. If it's a compelling topic, we will take it up in the future. And also, very often we have backstage conversations. So if you'd like to have access to those, you can go to my Substack, see how to become a premium member. And in the meantime, as always, we encourage you to continue grappling with the gray.